I don't know what made me change my mind about going to the meeting with Roger. I had pretty much decided that if the mentally unstable man who could only talk through a puppet was my only hope, then I was pretty much fucked anyway. But here I was, sitting outside the bowling alley, waiting to go inside to see what, if anything, he had to offer. I showed up early and decided to do a few circles around the building to see if anyone else was there. No sign of cars or activity, and from the looks of it, the place had been shut down for at least a decade. I would be surprised if they even had power inside. All I could think was that this was a nice place to get murdered. I took the pipe cleaner while I waited and used it to scrape up the inside of my gun barrel. A trick I'd picked up from some more seedy contacts I had back in the city. If they had found any way to tie my gun to the body currently rotting in the trunk of Vanessa's car, this would make ballistic fingerprinting impossible. Wow, I thought to myself. I'm gonna have to figure out how to ditch this body. One step at a time. That was a problem for later. Right now, I had to figure out who was pulling all these strings. Nobody had shown up by 8. At 8:05, I decided to break into the bowling alley. What's one more felony on a night like this, anyway? The back door was open when I tried it, so I slipped inside with my flashlight in one hand and my other firmly gripping my gun at my waist. The whole place smelled like a decaying carpet, and the air was thick with dust. I followed the hallway into the main lobby, where I heard a familiar voice of a puppet speaking to me from somewhere in the darkness. "Well, well, well, detective. You've certainly been busy today, haven't you? You know, if this whole private eye thing doesn't work out, I think you got a great career in terrorism." "Peter?" I said. "Where are you?" A figure emerged from the other side of the room, and once again, it was not what I was expecting. I could see the familiar wooden puppet staring at me, and it came closer and closer. But the person carrying him was not the same man that was in my family's living room earlier that day. Roger was being held and operated by a grossly overweight young woman with tan skin and pigtails. She stared at Roger while he said in the same voice he always used, "Who the hell is Peter? Were you expecting a friend? 'Cause I distinctly remember telling you to come alone." I shined my flashlight in the girl and said, "Who's this? Who are you?" She covered her eyes with one hand and used the other to work the dial, saying, "Don't mind her. This is Tristessa. I had to find a new host after the janitor went on his little episode." "A new host?" "Here, you're gonna want to take this." He spun his head to the side and facing the girl, Tristessa, and giving her a nod. That must have been her cue to pull a cell phone out of her pocket and offer it to me, which I accepted. "I know you're smart enough to have figured it out by now, but your old phone is bugged to here to hell and back. Keep this on so I can reach you when I need to." It was uncanny. Her lips were absolutely not moving. The doll, I concluded, must be voiced remotely somehow, and the girl was somehow moving his lips along with the words perfectly. This was insane. "Alright, where exactly are you, Roger? I'd love to know who I'm really dealing with." Roger let out a gleeful cackle and said, "Well, we rarely know who we're talking to. Don't you agree? Look, I bet you have a ton of questions, but I only have time to share the important stuff. You'll have to figure the rest out on your own. If you're not comfortable with this arrangement, then you can beat your feet right now, because the only answers I'm giving you are about Vanessa, as per our original deal." I shook my head and said, "Whatever, let's stick to the plan. What is it you found?" "It's not what I found, detective." Roger turned his head to Tristessa and nodded again, signaling her to hand me a thick manila folder labeled V. Riggin. I took it and started thumbing through. Roger, or whoever was really controlling Roger, had compiled an amazingly extensive list. Her background, childhood, family, report cards, school essays, her entire life cataloged in these pages. It was impressive work. I stopped on a page that said passwords, followed by a list. "How did you get her passwords?" "It was pretty easy, really. You just need to know the answers to some very basic security questions. Mother's maiden name, childhood best friend, favorite color, first pet. What's the point of having a secure password if the password keep is so easy to work around?" I scanned the list until I found a 6-digit code labeled cell, then suddenly felt the urge to change all of my passwords and move off the grid permanently. "Alright," I said. "You say it's not about what you found. Care to elaborate?" He continued. "In 1604, a star exploded, creating the Kepler supernova. It was reported and recorded far and wide, all over the planet. A brand new star in the night sky. This was a big deal. Religions claimed it was proof of their gods. Musicians wrote songs about it. Folks lost their frickin' minds. Enough that we're still talking about it now, 400 years later. People spend their lives trying to find a new object out there in the void. But what's funny to me is that in the last decade, dozens of stars have disappeared. It's just remarkable a phenomenon, isn't it? The starry night is still irrevocably changed, but no one tells stories when something old goes away. Only when something new shows up. I wonder what that says about mankind." "So you're saying the key isn't finding something that shouldn't be there, but finding something that should be there, but isn't. Bingo. Now you're starting to sound like a detective." "Okay," I said, holding the folder. "You want to tell me what should be in here?" "The mom." I looked at the girl Tristessa for any kind of emotion, but I couldn't get a read on her. And I sure as hell wasn't going to look for expressions on a puppet. "What about her?" "She has almost no footprint. She's a rock that falls into a pond and makes no ripples. Where is she? Why isn't she raising hell trying to find her missing daughter?" I put the folder under my arm and fished out my smokes, lighting one up before answering. "You seem to know a lot. Do you know what Capgras delusion is?" "As a matter of fact, I don't. But please, I live to learn." Capgras delusion is a mental condition where you think someone you know, someone you love, has been replaced. Vanessa's mother had it. Bad. She would tell me shit like, "I know it looks and acts like her, it talks and smells just like her, but this thing isn't my Vanessa." Nothing anyone would do could convince her otherwise. Just something wrong with the way her neurons fired. "Wow, that's messed up." "Yeah." He didn't say anything for a while after that. I took the time to finish my smoke. When I was finally done and I asked, "Was that it?" "Detective, I don't think you realize the gravity of what you just told me." "Oh, really?" "Yes. This is the key to the whole thing. This is why they chose Vanessa. They've done an amazing job hiding her mother to the point where even I can't find her name anywhere." "Wait," I said. "Back up 1 second. What do you mean by this is why they chose Vanessa? What do you know that I don't know?" Somewhere far behind me came the sound of metal scraping. A door had just been pushed open. "Ah, shit," said Roger in a hushed tone. "Do you smell that? They sent one of those things here. How did they find us, detective? I know you weren't stupid enough to get bugged, were you?" I turned off my flashlight and pulled out my gun and pointed it at the direction the noise came from. "Fuck you," I whispered. "How do I know you didn't bring someone?" It was nearly pitch black in there, but I could smell it. A gag-inducing something abysmal, like rotting meat and petrified shit. It came closer with the sound of heavy footsteps. I could hear it breathing, loudly, like a guttural animal growl. "Detective, there are 3 exits behind us. Our best shot at getting out of here alive is to split up and go." For once, I was already on the same page. I made a mental note of the closest way out before we had even started talking. And I had already started running by the time I heard Roger scream, "Now!" The thing, whatever it was, began running. I threw down Vanessa's folder and clicked on the flashlight as I bolted toward the side doors. I couldn't tell which direction the girl had gone, but that thing was right behind me, chasing straight after, and gaining. I hit the double doors full speed and I flung open, sending me falling down 3 steps on the other side and landing on the broken concrete, before spinning onto my back and pointing the gun at the empty doorway behind me. Whatever had been there now vanished, and I didn't feel inclined to wait and see where it had gone. I got back to the car and peeled out of there, part of me wanting to hit the interstate and never look back. But the stronger part of me realized how pathetic of a move like that would be. What was that thing back there? Some kind of hitter? It seems they changed the plan after the frame-up job went south. Now, they're just trying to do a good old-fashioned murder. I knew I wouldn't last long on the road with a bolo on the car, and I couldn't head back to Jamie's just yet because police would be watching. I'd run out of good options a while back, but it wasn't until I drove past a bar that I saw was open that I realized how desperate I was. I've helped bounty hunters track down dirtbags on a few occasions, and it never ceases to amaze me how stupid people can be when they're on the lam. If they had only kept their heads down, laid low, they wouldn't have been caught. If it were me, was the way I started plenty of thoughts back then. If you had told me weeks ago what I was about to do, I'd have thought you were crazy. I could never be that stupid. I pulled into the bar's parking lot and parked right next to the thing that had caught my attention from the road in the first place. The sheriff's deputy cruiser was parked backwards in a spot. I checked the plates to make sure, and I was right. This was the same cruiser I had been inside earlier that day. I walked inside and scanned the room. A small, poorly lit place with a ripped-up pool table, broken jukebox, deer heads on every wall, and country music playing overhead, while a couple barflies sat on their stools, watching something on television in silence. The bartender was a frumpy old gal who looked like she didn't know how to smile. She was leaning against the bar with her arms crossed, wearing a blue jean jacket with the sleeves cut off. And in the far corner, at a small table by herself, O'Brien was looking at something on her cell phone. I went straight to the bar and made my order. I'll take one of whatever that woman in the corner is drinking. The bartender looked at me and gave me a disapproving face and said, "Anything for you?" "I'll take a Jack and Coke. Hold the Jack. I'm the DD tonight." She rolled her eyes and made up the order. 1 soda, 1 dark beer. Then said, "You know, it ain't none of my business, but you and her don't gee-haw, hun. It might not be PC or whatever, but race mixing is wrong. That's just my 2 cents. In the midst of all this crazy shit that had gone on that day, I had almost forgotten how much I hated this fucked up, shitty small town. But nothing like a fresh dose of old-fashioned racism to remind me. She put the drinks in front of me and I dropped some cash on the bar next to them and said, "You're right, it isn't any of your business." I placed a beer in front of her and took a seat, waiting anxiously to find out if I'd made another mistake. O'Brien looked up from her phone and gave me an icy stare. I returned the look with a smile, which was probably the biggest and stupidest gamble I'd made since showing up in this shithole. But my gut told me that she wasn't one of them, and my gut had a pretty decent batting average, so here we were. She started laughing, instantly betraying how drunk she was. Okay, so far, so good. "Thanks, nail polish, but I'm an adult. I can get my own roofies." I just wanted to say thanks for driving me around earlier. "Well, aren't you a gentleman?" "No, of course not, I swear." She laughed again and put her phone away. This was the moment of truth. Was she going to arrest me, or... She finished the half-empty beer that sat in front of her, then put the glass down next to a couple empties, then grabbed the one I'd given her and took a healthy swig. I took a sip from my drink and waited for her to speak. "Any luck, detective?" "Lots. All of it bad." "And I suppose you expect your luck to change now?" "Well, it can't get much worse, can it?" I looked back at the bar and caught the woman there glaring at us in disgust. "Well, you can't say I didn't warn you. Thanks for the drink, but maybe you should get out of this town before someone with the inclination to arrest you figures out that you're at the local watering hole." "Someone like you, deputy?" "Definitely not someone like me. As you can plainly see," she gestured to all the empty glasses on the table, "I am off the clock. And while I'm off the clock, you can just call me Amelia. Look, I know this is going to sound pretty ballsy, but do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" She laughed out loud. It was a genuine, deep, drunken laugh. Made me realize that, under other circumstances, I would probably enjoy having a few drinks pissing the night away with Amelia O'Brien. "Sure, why not? But I get to ask you some questions too." "Seems fair." "So, is there a Mrs. Nail Polish?" "There was. A couple of times, actually. But there's just something about being a deadbeat husband that didn't really sit right with them." And I presume it was your brutal honesty that put the ladies off? Actually, that's one of my more charming attributes. She laughed again, and I relaxed a little. So what brings a city girl like you to a BFE town like this? Not sure. Sometimes I suspect I died and this is hell. That's a reasonable theory. You don't need to circle around the questions with me, Riggin. I know what you want to ask. What's going on here? Well, I can't help you, because I'm still trying to figure that one out myself. I showed up a month ago, and every night I go to sleep thinking the next day couldn't possibly be weirder. And every day, I'm proven wrong. You can call me Eric. I'm not going to do that, Manny Petty. But if you let me bum a smoke, I'll tell you whatever I know. It's not like it's gonna help you any. I fished out 2 cigarettes, lit hers for her between her lips. After the first drag, she coughed and laughed and put it out. She clearly wasn't a smoker. I know this is probably hard to understand, but I didn't sleepwalk off into the forest this morning. I got a phone call from someone claiming to be my brother. The only thing is, he's been dead for 4 years. Then I heard something in the woods. It's actually hard to explain. But when I was out there, the air started to heat up. It's like I was being boiled alive. She was listening to all of this attentively, and so far I hadn't lost her. I'd considered finishing the story, but knew that the truth was too much right now. Even if she bought it, no good could come from her knowing about the dead rednecks and the missing truck. You know what? I believe you. Because when I first started, there was about a week straight where the office was flooded from calls from the locals saying that they were being contacted by their dead loved ones. We figured it was just a bunch of kids playing a prank, but it didn't take long to figure out that no, something was really happening on a huge scale. Grandma Gertrude called to tell little Timmy that she didn't know where she was, but they got her. They put her brain in a jar or some bullshit. Really freaked people out. Then, one day, I got the order to drop the whole thing, and I'm warned not to talk about it. I put up a little resistance, but they saddled me with gas station duty. The rest is history. She took another big swig and put down her half beer before continuing. You know what a heat burst is? No, but I think I gather from the name of it that there's going to be an official explanation for what happened out in those woods. You stick around here for too long, you'll notice a pattern. No matter what happens, no matter how insane, there will always be an official explanation. Nothing supernatural ever happens. A heat burst is a rare weather phenomenon that occurs around these parts. Sometimes, temperatures will spike to 100, 120, or more, for no good reason. You want to know why I know that? I shrugged. They were talking about it on the radio, last week. Last week. That's a pretty weird coincidence, don't you think? But what else could it be? You'd think someone knew I'd be listening to the radio a week ago, and wanted to make sure I'd have the story loaded up to tell you tonight, just in case you were sitting here, thinking, I wonder if something supernatural is going on. My smoke was spent, so I put it in the ashtray and tried to think of what to say. Then, I felt something in my pocket vibrate. I pulled out the phone Roger had given me and read the text message. Triss is dead. That thing got her. I'm going to find a new host. Stay safe. I made a mental note to pour one out for the poor girl later on. If she were really dead. That was a damn shame. And I wanted nothing more than to find the person responsible and kick his teeth in. But just like the pain in my leg and the shock of dodging death by inches more than once, I would have to put this thought into a compartment somewhere deep in my mind and let it stay until after. After what? Hell, I didn't even know. Look, Riggin, I'm just as hot for malicious compliance as the next girl, but I can't exactly aid and abet a fugitive. I'm going to the little girl's room, and you're going to be gone by the time I get back. And then, maybe after I finish this drink, I'm gonna call Clyde and tell him you stopped by. You think that'll give you enough time to get on the road and head towards the home of the best lawyer you know? Yeah, I could do that. But here's the thing. There's always a thing, isn't there? You're not gonna like this, but I'm gonna need a huge favor. I was right. She didn't like it. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my $10 and above patrons. If you want to be on this list, head to the link down below and sign up for a $10 or above tier for a shout out in every video. Alejandro C., Official Jerboa, and Chaos X. Thank you guys. You keep this channel alive. I really appreciate it.